Hello there, welcome back to the channel. In this video, you're going to see how to create a module and then convert that module into a microservice with ABP. Follow along, we have also created a repo with all the sample code, and we have also all the instructions available in the README page. You can actually just use the README page to create your own microservices. This is just rundown of all the things we are going to do right now. We have already created a folder, which is an empty folder. Now let's start adding the commands. Here we have our new command, which mentions the name of the app, which is main app, and then the template as app, and then the UI as MVC. We are mentioning the structure as tired. That means the web and then the API layer and also the identity server is separated, and we are saying use the preview version. The current preview version is 5.0 RC1. The new version of 5 is going to be released, and that has a .NET 6 support. So I'm going to use the latest previews so that it will be easier for you to follow along when the next version releases in 2 or 3 weeks. So if you're watching this in 2 or 3 weeks when the 5.0 is released, you don't have to use this flag here. Otherwise, if you're following along right away, I would recommend you put the preview, because all the samples have preview packages. Okay, the next step is enter. Okay, our main app is created. You can see the version we chose is 5.0.0 RC1. The project name is main app and the template is app. Now let's add a new module. That command is ABP add module, and the module is project service, and we are mentioning new as a parameter to indicate that this is a new module, and preview is to use the latest preview version, which is 5.0.0 RC1. Okay. Now you can see that we ran both commands in the same folder, which is an empty folder which we created, and then now you can see that the .NET version is detected as 6. So everything should be fine. Let's open the project in Visual Studio Code and then see what we have. We have a modules folder, which has the project service, and then the source folder, which has the main app. So the first step I would recommend is to go and then build the project. So this will restore the packages and then build the solution for you. Okay, our build is successful. Now let's clear, and then let's go and start following the article. So we created, and then let's create the migrations and then run the migrations in the main app. To do that, I would come here to DB migrator. Okay, in the DB migrator, let's clear the terminal, and then here we will run .NET run. The DB migrator will set up the migrations for us and also seed our database with the required data so that we can launch our application. Okay, so to see whether the application is running, I'm just going to run the identity server and then make sure I can log in. If the identity server is running, that's probably everything else is running as well. Okay, let's launch our identity server. Okay, I will log in. Okay, we were able to log in the identity server. That means our seeding has been successful. Let's shut down the identity server, and then let's move on to the modules and then start creating the host for the module. We have an installer project, which is not necessary. Okay, so let's start creating the configuration. So first we have to create a host project for the project service. So if you come and look at it, the modules are designed in a way that it needs main, how do I say? It depends on the main app. So uh, we are actually adding a module to the existing ABP application. Now we are actually going to detach that from the main app and then going to run that as a separate independent microservice. To do that, if you go and come and check, we don't have a host here. So that's what we are going to do. We are going to add a host to the service. To do that, we have to come and then open an integrated terminal in the source folder. Maybe you will see the source folder here. Okay, and in the source folder, we will create a new web API application. So this will create the empty web API application. So you can see that there is nothing happening. It's using .NET 6 minimal API structure, and then it has a basic entity to create a very simple controller. So we are going to use this project as a host, and then we are going to create our host from scratch. The next step is to update the app settings of our host. Just copy and paste the sample app settings. So this app settings has the self URL, cross URL, and then the authority. So authority is the identity server. So we just launched the identity server. We can just go and then grab the URL from the identity server there. So go to the properties, launch settings, and this is the URL of the identity server. You can replace that. For the self URL, you can just go to properties, take the SSL port, apply it in localhost, change it to HTTPS. This is our application, this is our service URL, change that in the application URL as well here. Okay, so this is our self URL. Let's update that. And there is a Swagger client which we will create, and then the database name is project service. Perfect. Let's close this for now. Let's move on to the next step. The next step is adding the project reference to the packages reference to the newly created project service host. I will copy these things. I will just make sure these are RC1 versions of the ABP. As I said, if you are watching this, you will probably have 5.000. I will try to keep this repo updated and also update the README page once the ABP version 5.0 is released. For now, it's a RZ version. We are going to use the RZ versions. So go to the host file and then add our packages. So this is the packages, and then we all actually have a swashbuckle ASP.NET Core as a default. Remove that because ABP has a swashbuckle package available, so we don't have to use that. The next step is to add a package reference to the application. So, sorry, project reference. So to add a reference, we will copy the project references and then apply it in the host file. Now we have added the project reference for application entity framework API. Let's move on to the next step. Next step is we are adding a host module. So let's go and copy this name, and then the host module goes inside the host file, the host project. That is going to be a C# file, and we are going to copy the entire file. I will explain what's going on here. So this is the depends on which actually describes this ABP module depends on few other modules. So we are going to depend on the HTTP API module, application module, and entity framework module. This application actually is running on a multi-tenancy mode, so we have to say the multi-tenancy module is depending upon artifact is required for the dependency injection, and also all the service registration, and the Serilog is required for logging, and Swashbuckle is for the Swagger UI. In the configuration, we are configuring the JWT context using the authentication scheme, and the authority is the identity server. And we are actually loading the required metadata option, which is possibly false or true based on whether you're using HTTPS or not, and then we are giving the audience as project service. In the ABP Swagger gen with auth, this is to authenticate the Swagger with the client ID and the client secret. We will mention the authority as identity server again, and then provide a new scope. This scope is not created yet. We will go and create the scope in this video and then see this. So we have to provide the scope here so that the Swagger UI knows which scope it's actually using. And this is pretty basic stuff we usually do to create automatic controllers. And then we have the CARS policy and the application initialization. If most of the things are available in the main host. So basically, I took most of the things from this main host, and also you can see the structure in this, which main host depend on a few other things as well. Yeah, if you want to explore more, check out the main host file. You will get a better idea. So let's move on to the next step. The next step is to create the program.cs. We already have a program.cs, but it's in a different structure. It's in the minimal API structure. We are going to update that and then use the old school way of doing things. Let's open the program.cs file, replace everything. And yeah, this is a very basic program.cs which you file in almost all the ABP application. There's nothing special happening. We don't have a startup file, so we have to add a startup.cs, and we have to update the startup.cs with new information as well. So the startup.cs, which basically starts the application and then says, hey, when the configure service happens, add our module which we created as a new application, and then in the configure we initialize the application. So basically, when we configure, this configure method is called during the initialization. This initialization method is called. That's it. And the next is to create a home controller and then update the content of the home controller. We will create the file in the home controller. So we have a controller here, and we will add a home controller. And yes, we don't need this. We can delete this. Just copy it and then paste it. So we have our home controller, and we also don't need the weather forecast. I will delete that. Yes. So our home controller is ready. It's pointing to Swagger UI, and we have already configured the Swagger UI. Now we just have to create a new service to the project. So I will add a class called project that will go in the domain. Go and then add a new C# class called project in the domain. Okay. I will add a new C# file called project.cs, and the project.cs will have some basic entities. Basically, this will come from the entity which is coming from bolo.app.entities. Wait. Using, and the grid needs a using system. So the project is going to be a very simple entity with the name property, and it's using an entity. It's derived from an entity which actually has a GUID ID. That's our entity. The next is adding that to the EF core, the entity framework DB context. We just added the DB context to the entity, and then we will use domain, which we just created. And we will have to configure the entity. I will just copy this and then go to the configure project services, and I will update the configure project services method. If it is too fast, or if you don't know what I'm doing at this point, I would recommend you to go and check out the quick start guide, because we are creating a simple app service here, or just go and check out the last videos regarding adding modular, adding a new module with a separate database. So yeah, the next is to add, this is just an optional thing. If you don't have the .NET EF tool installed, just make sure you install it. Now the EF core project needs the EF core design package, and then also the entity framework, and also the SQL Server first. Let's go and update the package reference of this EF core. There's also a small change here. I think this should be DB schema, yes. And the next step is to update the CSproj. CSproj already has an item group. We can go and update the item group. We can say restore. Okay, and we already have entity framework core as a package reference. Along with that, we have to add SQL Server as a package reference. Okay, now we have entity framework core and also SQL Server. Okay, let's move on to creating a DB context factory. Again, for more information on a DB context factory, there is a documentation link for the document in the Microsofts. Just go and check out what does design time context is. We are going to create this design time context in the entity framework core project. I will go and then add a new C# file and name it design time factory.cs, and copy this file and then replace it. Okay, what are we doing in this? First, I will fix all the usings, and then I will explain. Okay, so this is a DB context which we are going to create for the design time only. And in this, we are inheriting from iDesign DB time context factory. And this is actually using the actual DB context. In this, we have a create DB method, which is using SQL Server. The only important thing you have to note is the build configuration here, which we are actually using the the app settings, which is actually from our host project. So we have our project service host. So this project will go back the location and then add the JSON file from our host, and then create the connection string, because if you check out this project, this entity framework project doesn't have a connection string, but we have our connection string in HTTP API host here. So this is where our connection string is located, project service. So that is what that design time factory is doing. So it goes back one folder and then checks for the project service HTTP host, and then add the app settings.json from that file, and then from that file you take the connection string. The next step is to create the migration. Okay, so to create the migration, we are going to create it in the entity framework core project. Perfect. Let's open a terminal and let's run the add migration. Okay, the migrations are successful. Too many terminals here. I will close all of them. And you should have our migration here. So the migration is, yes, we have our table name and the table has an ID and the name. It's a very simple table. Okay, since the migration is done, now the next is to update the database. Okay, I close the, opening the terminal again, and I will run update database, which should build again and then create the database for us and apply the migration. Okay, our migrations are done. So now let's go and create the entity DTO. DTO is created in the contracts project. Let's go and create the entity there. I will say new C# file and give the name of the DTO. Perfect. So once we have the entity DTO, where did it go? Okay, we have our entity DTO. Close all this and then open it again and replace it with the code. Okay, our DTOs are ready. Now let's create the app service. So one important thing here is the application service. So make sure your interface inherits from that, because we are going to use the remote service calls to communicate between the services. Yeah, so app service is the name of the interface. I would new, no, it's not a class, it's the interface. Okay, now replace that our, let's fix the usings. Okay, I fixed our usings, and then let's create a project app service that will be in the application. .cs. We will use the namespace of project and copy the entire thing and then place it here. Now we will need to authorize using authorization. The repository is coming from follow repositories. Okay, now we have fixed our usings. Just we have an authorize attribute here to protect our API. We are using the default repositories, and we have a create method which actually inserts a single text, and also delete method based on the ID, and also get list which will get all the projects. And the next step is to create the to add default repositories to all the entities, and then also tell the NPF core to use SQL Server. Let's go and do that. Copy this. Go to entity framework core, and entity framework. You will have the module here, and put everything here. So this adds the default repositories for the entity we created. So this enables this iRepository to work for the project. The next step is to create the API scope. So as of now, we have created the host. So you can actually go and run the host now and then see what happens. So if you come and run the host in the integrated terminal, so this will launch. So our application is running. Yeah, so we are also picking up the sample services. You can just ignore them. But when you look at the project, and if you wanted to like add a new project, you will say, oh, not 401, because we have an authorize symbol, but we don't have any authentication, and we are yet to create this Swagger client or create the scopes to actually communicate with the main app, because we need a token to secure, because we configure the JWT token, and then we have to configure this service with the identity server, and then there should be a mechanism to validate the user. So we are going to first add a client to the project service. Let's go and do that. Let's stop this. I will also close all the terminals. So we have our module, and now we have to actually configure the identity server. To configure the identity server, we have to go to the domain, and then identity server. There is the identity server's data seed contrib. This is the file which we are using to seed the data into the identity server. So there is a seed method which creates the standard resources, API resources, scopes, and then the client. The first thing is to create the API scope. So come back to the article, and then we will create the API scope called project services. This is going here, and the next is to create the API resource, and this goes here. And the third is to add the app settings.json. So this is in the DB migrator. We are actually adding a new client for the service Swagger auth. So to copy this and then go to the DB migrator project. In the DB migrator project, there is app settings, and then this app settings has list of clients. So we're going to update the client. And in the client, we are having a project service.swagger, and then we are mentioning the client secret. And here we have to put our service URL. The service URL is the URL of the host, which is available in source, the host which we created. And if you go to properties in the launch settings, you will have the URL. This is our service URL. And come back and then add it to the root. Perfect. So now our project service is ready. Let's go and then create our scopes. So for creating the client, first make sure the scopes are updated with the new scopes we are going to create. That is going back to identity seed contrib. So we already added the API resource. Now this is where the clients are created. Add a new scope, and we have to add a new client. This is the new client. This is for the default Swagger client. We are adding a new Swagger client for our project service, which is based on the client ID we took. And then we are actually taking the root URL and also mentioning the grant type as authorization code. And here is the Swagger secret. It's actually not required. And then we are saying redirect URL is Swagger redirect URL. So this is coming from Swagger. This is not us doing anything. Okay, the next step is to run the migration so that the data is seeded, because this file only seeds the data when we run the migration. So you will see that in the migration, if you post the services, it actually goes and then takes all the migration and then runs it. So we will first come back to the terminal here and then say .NET run. Okay, our migrations are done. The next step is to update the course origin in the identity server. So we basically added a new service. So we have to let the identity server know, hey, there is this new endpoint which will try to contact you. Please allow that. For that, go back to the application URL and then come back to the identity server course origin and here is the course origin. So we are saying there is few URLs here. We are just going to add it. This is our new app. We are saying, hey, please allow the request coming from this URL to be accepted as well. The next is when, so now we have we have updated the migration services. Now our microservice is actually done, but how do we communicate between the microservices? So for that, we are going to use client proxies. The client proxies are clearly explained here in the dynamic C# client proxies documentation. Basically, it just creates a remote HTTP service for you. All you have to do is just configure, make sure you have an app service available in your interface, and then make sure your client module depends on the HTTP client module, and then add the HTTP client proxies from the application module. It's pretty easy to do. Let's do that. And for our application service, I will first add this client proxies. So we have projects. So we have to first add the reference of project service application contracts in the main app HTTP client. So I would say just copy this and then go to main app HTTP client. So main app HTTP client, and then add a project reference here. We already have a project reference for other projects. And the next step is to plus all. Next step is to update the main app HTTP client module with the project service module. So that is happening here. So we just added the project reference, and we are using the project service application contract. And here we also need to update the configure method. So this is for the main app. We are actually saying, hey, do the same for the application contract module as well. Now, here we have to update the app settings.json in the main app. So there is already a remote service section in the web app of the main app. So if you come to main app.web, basically it's already doing the remote service calls, but using the base URL, we are going to add a new service called project service here. Okay, so okay, this is coming from this. So so this is the self URL. So you can come here, and this is the URL of your application, that is the project service. Come here and then update that here. The next thing is updating the web app for the OIDC service. So we the main app is using OpenID Connect. We just have to add this new scope to the project service. So if you go to the main app web module, you will have the OpenID configurations. Here it adds main app as a scope. Now we are also saying project service is also a scope. Let's go and create a project.cshtml, which is basically a page which displays a bunch of things. And copy it, paste it. This is a very basic Razor page. I will copy the project model, paste it here. Okay, in the project model, if you saw, we are basically inheriting from main app page model, and then we are just the model is actually a list of projects, and we are also injecting project app services. We are just using, even though it's a remote service, we are just using the project app service as a normal service. We are injecting it, and then we are just calling that and then setting the project as the response to the list of projects as the model. Now to insert the menu, we just go and update and then create a new menu in the main app menu contrib, so that this newly created page will show up as a menu. So the menu contrib is here, and then just go and add this as a new menu. So you will have main home, and then in the home we have a project menu which is going through this project and has an icon of list. Yeah. The next is running the application. Now we have 4 applications to run. We are going here and there, running each individual project. To simplify that, we will initiate a tie. You can do that same tie init. I will do that in the root of the folder. Tie init. So this will create a tie file for us. This is the tie file. So it actually recognized our web project and created a tie thing for us, and also recognized our identity server host, and we have a console and the migration, which we don't want. We just need the project service though, which is missing. So I would recommend just coming here and then copying these things and then pasting it in your now we have few other things in here, which is we have our bindings to a port. These are the sample ports. You just have to update the ports. So come here and then check out the port in the web app from properties. The SSL port is 4320. So just come back and then say, hey, this is my port. And for identity server, do the same. For host, it's again the same. Go to properties, launch settings, find the port, and then update the tie. Now, finally, the project service. Just go to the host and properties, launch settings, and port. Okay, now we have updated all the ports. Our tie is ready. Let's run it. And let's first close all. I will also minimize all the apps so that if in case something went wrong, it's easier to debug. Okay, so sorry, like clear and then say tie run. First, I don't want to watch, let's just run. Okay, the tie has run. We have our tie dashboard in 80, so you can see we have our main app. Yeah, I will zoom a little bit. Yeah, so we have our main app, we have our identity server, and then our main app HTTP host, and then our project service. So first, I will run the main app, and then the identity server, main app, HTTP host, and then the Swagger. We have our project service running, our main app running, and then our identity server running, and our application running. You can see there is a projects list. If you come here, it's actually empty. There's nothing going on. And we have our main app where everything runs okay. We have our Swagger endpoint. Now let's try to authorize the project service. So click the project scopes and then click authorize. It will redirect to the identity server, and we have our token now. Now let's go and then do a get request. It should pass through and then give us an empty result. Yes, we have our empty result. And let's post something like project 1 and then execute. The project 1 is created. Let's do 2. and 3. Perfect. So we have created 3 projects and do a GET request, and then okay, we have 3 projects coming as a result. Now, when we go to main app and then click projects, still empty because we are not logged in. So when we click login, we will log in with identity server. Now we are logged in as admin. We can see admin menus. Along with that, we also see a project menu. When you click project, we have 3 projects. So we have our microservice running separately, and these microservices can have independent instances. We can also put a gateway and then connect them together, and the microservice also has a separate database which stores this data, and we have our main application which is running in a separate database, but it's connected through dynamic proxy, which is explained clearly here. It's a very easy method of just connecting microservices. There is also different methods to communicate between services. This is a very simple microservice where you just have one service. You can actually use the same to connect multiple services. The way to create more services is the same. Just add a module and add a host to that service. And you just can call and make calls between the services using dynamic C# client proxies. Yes, and our logs can be viewed in Thai here, which is also a pretty neat integration. Yes, that's pretty much it for this video. I know this is a very long video, but we were going through a lot of features of ABP. We just created a module, and then yeah, and then we just have to configure the host, and then we had to set up the authentication with JWT and also create scopes, add scopes to the identity server. There are too many things. I would recommend you just go through the videos and the source code together so that you get a better understanding of like what's actually going on. And then in the article, you will see the links to the entity or EF core. If you don't understand, go back and watch the previous videos of modularity in ABP, and you will get a better understanding of like what's going on. Okay, that is for this video. I will come back with another video. Until then, have a nice day. Bye-bye.